Good evening and welcome to the Halcyon Podcast with your host, Lorne Risley. That's me. Sorry for the lack of content this week. For those that have been watching, for those that have been listening, it's been a weird old week. Car broke, then my bike broke, so I had to become reconnected with part of my anatomy I hadn't become connected with in a long time, my Achilles tendons. Turns out they're not well suited to running and weren't willing to cooperate for the first few days, but nevertheless, it wiped me out for most of last week. I've now had a day to recuperate. My bike is now fixed. All 7 gears are working, or there would be if there were 7. There are now 6 gears because my bike is such a heap of crap. I digress, but nevertheless, apologies again for the lack of content. However, the Halcyon Podcast, it's late, but it is here. I've got a few things to talk about on this podcast, and I don't really want to leave this one till last because I think it's the most important. Story recently, I followed, but I never really talked about because I just felt it wasn't my business. But a few years ago, there was a story via the WWE that I put it to anybody. If you can watch the video package without crying, you must check yourself in for some sort of psychiatric therapy because, good God, it hits you where you live. Kind of the Crusher, I forget his last name, unfortunately, but a child who was diagnosed with terminal illness. WWE met him via the Make-A-Wish Foundation and then followed his progress until, unfortunately, he passed away. And his story was remarkable in how brave, how assertive, how full of life, and how funny he was, and how intelligent he was, considering his age, and how heartbreaking it was that it wasn't a happy ending to the story. I.e., his cancer would go into remission, or whatever the case it might have been. It just really hits you where you live, and unfortunately, this week we're greeted with another story. Bradley Lowery, a young Sunderland fan, 6 years old, has passed away this week. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because it's hard to understand as a 27-year-old whose life is slowly passing by, opportunities coming and going, the wider world getting bigger and more frantic every single day with a lot of stuff that doesn't matter, doesn't really have any significance or consequence. And then you follow this story and the story of Connor, and their time is so fucking precious. And you see the way they approach things with just no negativity, no lack of ambition, just pure vigor and vibrance and life and hope and happiness despite the suffering that they're going through. And I gotta be honest, and I don't mind admitting this. I was reading. I had my laptop with me on my bed yesterday evening. Like I said, I was recovering from my runs last week. I think I covered about 35-40 miles by foot, so I was pretty out of it. And the story came up, and I can't lie and say I had a cry, man. I was just reading the story. I didn't watch any videos. I was just looking at, the pictures of the article, reading the story. And just something hit me about it, man. It's kind of indescribable. It's the tragedy that you look at this kid, this poor boy, and you got hope in your heart. He can't really be dying. He can't really be on the cusp. Something must happen. Something must come along. Somebody must help this kid. And there's another one at the moment that's killing me as well. There's a baby who basically has a disease that renders him. He can't do anything. He can't breathe. He can't cry. He can't. And there's all these debates going on about what they should do. And here's me again, the naive person that I am. I just think you always choose life. I think you always choose hope. I think you always have to be optimistic with things, because when there's life, there's chance. And if there's a chance, there's a positive outcome that could be attained. And maybe I'm stupid for hoping that, but I've seen instances where people gave people no chance, or a situation was a no-win or a must-lose, and they pulled through. And I guess what broke my heart about this is because, considering the attention he was being given, and how much of an outpour there was for Bradley, I really hoped he'd pull through. And I'm really gutted, like personally heartbroken for the family, and I'm not a religious person, but God bless him. You know, I hope there's some peace to be found now for everybody involved. I hope examples of this can be used to try and focus on what matters in life, which is kids, showing them a better way, getting rid of all the bullshit and the bureaucracy and all the stupid stuff that clouds our judgments all days, for something greater than ourselves, which is, like I say, if you don't want to believe in religion, the next generation is what you got to believe in, because that's your legacy. That's what continues long after you die. So yeah, I wanted to share that because, again, I have no personal connection, but I can't, again, I'm bringing it back. Again, as a parent, you know, seeing pictures of my little one and just trying to imagine what the parents of this little boy must have been going through is it's fucking heartbreaking, man. And I would strongly advise that if you're unaware of the story, go and read into it, because there's a number of tributes on Sky Sports and the BBC network, Sky News as well. They're well put together. They're very heartfelt. Jermaine Defoe has also been. He's not the most eloquent gentleman, but you can tell. You know, it's not a marketing ploy. It's not a publicity stunt. The dude has done what he can to try and make this little boy's life in the last few weeks of his life that little bit better. And I think it's a courageous thing to do, because he could have very easily just done the one and done, you know, and just left knowing that he'd done that little bit, but he stuck to it. And I think, again, I don't like admitting this about a former Spur, but he deserves great credit for that. So yeah, sorry to have to bring it down in the first 5 minutes of the podcast, 7 minutes. Unfortunately, I really wanted to talk about that because news story hasn't really hit me like this as much as anything else has recently, and I really wanted to talk about it because, man, he was so brave, and you could just tell he was just so full of life and so full of potential. Always, it's just heartbreaking, man, heartbreaking. It's gonna be hard to pick this podcast up now. Yeah, sorry about that. Right, let's talk about something else. And I'm sorry to have to switch to something dumb, but it's the only way I think I can continue by trying to drag something positive out of this podcast now. So, let's talk about the worst name for a WWE pay-per-view that I've ever heard. Great Balls of Fire. The giant phallic flaming reference. Yes. I've just not got great hopes for it, with the exception that Joe might actually win. There's a number of betting odds that are coming out at the moment that says Brock Lesnar might be looking to drop the title to Samoa Joe, so that Joe can then lose it to Reigns, and then Reigns can then go on to defend it against John Cena at WrestleMania, which is an interesting turn of events, considering the fact that, with all things considered, I think everyone was pretty much sold on the idea that Brock Lesnar was going to go on to face Roman Reigns, and no one was going to be fucking happy about it. So, let's go through, let's make the predictions, because again, I am the PWT World Heavyweight Champion. I haven't defended my championship in a while. Should probably lay out a challenge at some point. I'll touch on something at the end, which was probably a contributing factor to that, but let's go through. So, the kickoff match for the Cruiserweight Championship. We have Neville, the current incumbent champion, versus Akira Tozawa, one of the finer wrestlers on the WWE roster. Neville's going to win this. Let's move on. the Intercontinental Championship match between The Miz and Dean Ambrose. This is one of those matches where again the heel looks like he's going to win because he just does more with the title. That's going to be The Miz. We also have Enzo Amore versus Big Cass. Again, that looks to me like a Big Cass win, although... No, it's going to be a Big Cass win. So I'm going to have to switch it up for the next one because that would make it 3 heel wins in a row. Now remember, you've always got to send the fans home happy with something. And considering that the next matches are not much to shout about, there's only so many opportunities. So the 30-minute WWE Iron Man Raw Tag Team Championship match, that's almost as much of a mouthful as the PWT World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship Champion of the World incumbent. Not quite, but seriously close to. Sheamus and Cesaro, current champions versus the Hardy Boys. I think the Hardy Boys might snag this. I think these two might feud for a little while longer because we've still got the broken gimmick to go into. Sheamus and Cesaro are a credible threat to them now. We've established that. So why not let them exchange the belts for a little bit? Make the titles seem like they're competing for the titles and just vying for them, and these two tag teams are just getting higher and higher and better and better. Do that for a bit. So Hardy Boys win. Then move on to Seth Rollins versus Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt, sorry buddy, but Seth's winning this one, so that's 2 relatively face wins. I don't know if the Seth Rollins is really a face at the moment, but still. Alexa Bliss versus Sasha Banks. This is kind of a big deal because Sasha Banks hasn't really been doing much for a while. And Alexa Bliss is probably one of the better performers on the roster at the moment. So I'd have to think Alexa Bliss is walking away with it, but there's a niggle in the back of my head that says Sasha Banks might turn heel in this match. It'd be an interesting dichotomy, but I think all things considered, Alexa Bliss. And then you've got the ambulance match with Braun and Boo Roman Reigns. I think Roman Reigns is winning this one, mainly because they need to start building his momentum for the potential WrestleMania match, or even just a SummerSlam. Which is interesting because a lot of people, I'm going to talk about this for a few moments, even though we're nearly halfway through the podcast. This might take up a bit of time, considering I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more topics to cover, but nevertheless, Roman Reigns is now starting to get a rap as a good performer, not only from a critical standpoint, but some of the fans are starting to turn. They're starting to give Roman more and more of a due than perhaps they were inclined to give him originally. And I think that's worrying because really, what has he done? He's not done anything. He's performed in a couple of good matches, but look at who the matches were against. And promo-wise, what has he done? Well, nothing, again. People are just kind of tired on hating on Roman Reigns because it's now the popular opinion, and they're starting to do the whole fucking contrarian thing where they're like, oh, actually, I think Roman Reigns is actually a pretty good wrestler, and his promo work has actually been the best of 2017. Like, fuck it has! The one good promo he did, he said 4 words! And he stood there 50 minutes. There was nothing.
Hello people, this is Rob, also known as Banhead, and today we have a interesting video for you. It is my top 5 favourite original Transformer characters. Now these characters are 100% created by me. The only artwork that is not mine is pictures of the vehicles. Everything else is mine, you should tell, because it's got like a little RT in the top. Just to make you aware, I'm not an artist. I'm not good at drawing or anything like that. So just keep the criticism to a minimum if possible. Ah, fuck it, constructive criticism, great. And let's crack on with number 5.
A few moments later.
And that's our folks. That is my top 5 Transformers original characters made by yours truly. As stated before, most of the artwork's mine, some of it is not. So please don't sue my ass. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more content coming soon. In fact, speaking of that, I recently posted on my Facebook, Robert Thompson, go and find me, about a video that's coming up soon, hopefully after this weekend, where I will be answering questions. Now, these questions can be anything from super serious stuff to, well, whatever the fuck you want. I'm still ready to take questions if anyone wants to post any more. I've had some fucking amazing responses so far. So if anyone does want to, just go over to Facebook and search for me, Robert Thompson. You can't miss my picture. I've got a rainbow coming out of my mouth. Anyway, back to today. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, more content coming soon. As always, if you could leave a little like, comment, hey, fuck it, even subscribe while you're here. And yeah. Well, ham that fucking outro up. Anyway, fuck it. Ladies, guys, I have been Rob, also known as Banhead. Ta-tars.
Hello everyone, Craig here, and this is GFY Productions. We're about comedy, satire, parody, skits, whatever makes you laugh. I might be a little bit more vulgar than Halcyon, but in the end it's all comedy. I don't try to take myself too seriously, and in real life, I'm really not that opinionated about stuff. So when you come to GFY Productions, just come to laugh. If you're weird or you don't have many friends, this is the channel for you, because I'm also weird and have very few friends. Anyway, thanks Halcyon for plugging this. Totally don't have to, but I appreciate it. Great guy, great channel. What else can I say? Well, I won't say my catchphrase because don't want to get anybody in trouble. Alright, peace.
Hi there, my name is Cronenberg, or Crow as my friends call me, and welcome to my channel. Here you will find many playlists of all sorts of games, ranging from well-known titles and many genres such as Outlast, Sniper Elite, Civilizations, all the way down to the smaller games like Limbo, Yesterday, Dementium and Civ City. I also create footage of Battlefield 3 and 4, looking at loadouts, progression, etc. With some game reviews and demos thrown into the mix, I tend to have something for everybody. So please enjoy the videos, subscribe to my channel, and maybe suggest a few games for me to try. Thank you, Crow.
To do with him, that is what he did based on the booking. Nothing he did. This is the thing I keep coming back to as far as people are like, well, it's always been that way, booking. No, fuck that shit. Stone Cold Steve Austin was booked in that way, fair enough. But it was his personality and his personal ingenuity and what he was willing to risk to get over that got him over. Same with The Rock. Even to an extent Triple H, because there was a dude there who was crying to come out for a long time. And yes, maybe I'm slightly behind the curve, but enough with it to kind of negate any need to say, oh, well, I'm just copying everyone else. No, he's I wouldn't say Triple H has ever been innovative. I think he's a great student and knows enough to go with the times to an extent. But nevertheless, we're off track here. Roman Reigns, I still don't rate as a main face. I don't think he's really the person to carry the brand going forward, because he's just he's a guy that people hate because he's been rammed down their throats, and that doesn't change. He's still being rammed down your throat, and yet people are starting to turn now, which is a terrible idea, because if people then start vindicating this decision by Vince McMahon and the rest of the management team over at WWE that they can just continue until they win the war of attrition, what do you think they'll do in the future? They'll just continue to do it. It's insane, and you need to consider the options before you do it. Anywho, so as far as the Roman Reigns Express goes, I'm not on board still, but I'm calling it now. I'm going to see a lot of people warming to Roman Reigns by WrestleMania. In fact, if they put him against John Cena, this might be the coronation that WWE wanted all along with him versus Triple H, because what they shouldn't have done is put him against a heel. They should have put him against a babyface that everyone knows that they hate, which is John Cena. Half boo him, half cheer him, because half don't know any better. So I'm quietly worried about the Roman Reigns situation and the ramifications it has for the professional wrestling circuit going forward, because he doesn't bring anything new to the table. But anyway, massive digression. On to the next ambulance match as well. Not seen one of those in a long time, so I'm interested to see what the PG version of an ambulance match is going to look like. No colour, people. Remember that. We're not into violence here. We tell stories. We make movies. Whatever the fuck that means. Anyways, on to the final match of the card. The WWE Universal Championship match versus... Turn down your speakers. Are they down? Good. Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe. It has to be said, the lead up to this has been freaking amazing. Samoa Joe choking out not only Heyman, but Brock. The promos between the two, it's been great. I'm really looking forward to this match. And it has to be said that I don't think anyone really expected Joe to take the initiative that he has with this, because I think when they swerved everybody at the end of the Fatal 5-Way with Finn Balor almost looking like he was going to win and being the force, given the promo that Paul Heyman had given the week before, being that Finn Balor was, I think he said something along those lines, he was a Paul Heyman guy or something like that, or he was a genuine threat or whatever. For Joe to then win and then to be given a credible chance against him is brilliant. And I'm really looking forward to this match, which means that for 2 pay-per-views in a row, the match I'm most looking forward to involves the Big Samoan. I think it's going to be a decent match. It just depends on how invested Brock Lesnar is and where the feud goes from there. Does he drop the championship to Joe? If he does, when does he get his rematch? How does the rematch and the pretense of the rematch go? Is it just another straight-up match, or is there a stipulation? Is anyone else involved in this? And me personally, I'm still not convinced that Taker's gone forever and ever. So I don't know whether or not there's something that might happen in between WrestleMania and now where Taker gets involved in some way, because of course Lesnar is the ultimate foe for the Taker, considering he took the streak. I don't care about Roman Reigns, we'll just pretend that never happened. But Lesnar versus Joe, it promises to be an interesting encounter, but it really depends on the work rate that Lesnar is willing to put in terms of selling to Joe, because I don't think it'll be a squash. I don't think it will, because I think there's too much at stake for Lesnar and Joe now that Lesnar's been humanized by Goldberg, that Lesnar then can't go on to WrestleMania, or maybe I keep pitching to WrestleMania. SummerSlam is probably more realistic with Joe, getting that feud done and done. Even if it's just Joe dropping it back to him at SummerSlam, I don't know. But I have a funny feeling that Joe is walking away with the championship on this one. So I'm going with Joe. So, to recap, my title hinges on Neville, Big Cass, The Miz, Hardy Boys, Seth Rollins, Alexa Bliss. I didn't call Roman Reigns and Strowman. How rude. I'm picking Reigns for this one. Reigns and Samoa Joe winning their respective matches. So, we shall see. Goodness gracious, worst pay-per-view name of all time. Happens tomorrow evening. I think the official kickoff is around 11 p.m. UK time. And I think it's a 3-hour pay-per-view or a 2-hour 50-minute, 45-minute pay-per-view. So I will probably end up watching that on Monday evening after work. So I won't be able to get the podcast up and done until after I watch the pay-per-view. So that'll be dropping on Tuesday. This is being recorded on the 8th, which means it'll be going out on the 9th. So I look forward to that. So that's the great pay-per-view out of the way. Let's talk about football transfers. Yay! Football transfers. And I actually have something to talk about as far as football transfers are concerned. Arsenal signed somebody. And he wasn't some bloke from the arse end of nowhere that no one's ever heard of. How cool is that? So, Lacazette, Alexandre, or Alexander, or however you pronounce it. I'm not too sure what the French, because I thought it was literally Terry Henry when he signed. Lacazette, thought to be around the 45 to 50 million pound mark, but nevertheless one of the most consistent strikers in League One over the last 3 years. A great, he's got pace, he's got agility, he's got a decent header, scores a lot of goals from inside the box, which is fine because we're not really, we're a team that likes playing around a little bit. So if they can create the opportunities for him, Ozil can pick the pocket if Cazorla can get match fit. Excuse me, how rude. If Cazorla can get match fit, if Xhaka can start finding those ping passes from when he was at Mönchengladbach, then who knows? Who knows? We haven't got the Champions League to worry about, albeit people seem to be forgetting. We're still in the Europa League, if I'm not mistaken. And that's not a good thing because that is a really taxing tournament. And I know you're not allowed to do this, but I really hope Wenger goes, now listen everybody, just throw the game, please. Just lose 1-0, make it look like it was just a fluke. Because who really needs the Europa League? Just focus on the Prem. Do the right thing this year. Don't worry about the FA Cup. Don't even worry about the League Cup. Don't worry about Europe. Don't worry about nothing. Just focus on that Premier League. If you can get the title, fine. But at least make a credible, season-prolonged challenge. I think that's what Arsenal fans are really clamouring for. That's what they're really clamouring for. They're not actually clamouring for a title. I think we all realise that that's an unrealistic proposition to set every single year. What Arsenal fans want to see is a sustained and credible title challenge, i.e. being in the lead for a little bit, maybe losing a game or two, but staying in the hunt after that, maintaining momentum for a little bit, maybe catching up, overtaking, back and forth until the last day of the season when we've got a realistic chance of still walking away with the title. Even if we don't walk away, it's bitterly disappointing, but Arsenal fans will feel like they've got their money's worth for once in a season. And you can't fault the fact that Arsenal have pulled it out to sign this guy, even though they should have signed him 2 years ago when everyone was touting him originally at 30 odd million quid. Now it's more like 50. Hey, he's 26 years old. His best years are still ahead of him. And now he's got all the matchcraft to hit the ground running. And he's got plenty of experience in Europe. He's got plenty of experience at international level. He's French, which means he'll get along fine with all the French boys. Hey, I think it's a match made in heaven, and I can't wait to see what he can do. Sanchez, I think, that's probably the signal that he's going to leave. I don't necessarily think that Arsenal will be stupid enough to let a player of his quality go without selling him, because it's too much. There's too much money on the table otherwise for a fiscally responsible company like Arsenal. However, his wage issues, I think, might give him pause for thought. You never know. I think with Sanchez, I'm hearing a lot of stories with regards to his wage demands being in the high. Well, put it this way: it's either high 200,000s to low to mid 300,000s. That's a lot of money. And I get he's a great player, but how many clubs at the moment are really desperate for players of his ilk in that position for that kind of money? It's not a lot. It's not a lot. Bayern Munich maybe, but I think he'll find it a lot tougher at Munich than he really realises. Vidal really hasn't sold. He hasn't sold it as well as I think perhaps he thinks he has. But Arsenal aren't the ones who are making all the transfer news at the moment, which is nice. The interesting news with regards to Romelu Lukaku, the Belgian striker currently plying his trade for Everton, is imminently moving to Manchester United under the noses of Chelsea, it seems. However, as of 6:37 this afternoon, he is set to appear in US court because he had a party and he was playing music too loud. What a dumb... Literally, as he's having a medical the next day. He's supposed to be sleeping for the medical, by the way. No, he's up partying. Prior to the day he's supposed to be signing for a club for like somewhere in the region of 75 to 90 million pounds. A ridiculous sum of money. And he's presumably not going to get nothing for playing for him either. He's probably looking at a significant pay rise. And he's... footballers, they're young. I forget sometimes that I'm actually older than Lukaku. I'm older. If I met this guy in the street, I'd speak to him in a patronising way because he's younger than me. I'd like, dude, I'm 3 years older than you. I've got more life experience than you, with the greatest respect. You don't know jack shit. He had to kick a ball in the back of the net. Good for you. And yet, I am still that guy saying, dude, you're signing for one of the biggest clubs in the world, for one of the largest sums of money football has ever seen. Maybe get a good night's sleep before the medical and have the party afterwards? Maybe, I don't know. Don't have the party the night, because someone wise once said, nothing good can ever happen to you in a bar, especially if you're married. Now, I know Lukaku's not married, and I know it was a party at his house, but the premise remains the same. I never understood the fascination of people with it, and it's just hilarious to me that now Chelsea, United, Everton all look to have a bit of a difficult time, a more difficult time ahead, considering the sum of money than they really should be having. But nevertheless, I'm going to divert back to Arsenal now and say, all right, Lacazette is a great signing. Fantastic. Brilliant. Couldn't be happier with him, considering the options, considering what's out there in terms of the transfer market. Lacazette, brilliant signing. I still think, in terms of our team, we just need another centre-back and a bit more coverage for Bellerin. If Bellerin decides to leave, especially, of course, because then we need to replace his sorry ass, because he's getting caught like a motherfucker from Barcelona. I think it's a matter of when, not if, that Bellerin goes to Barcelona at this point. There's just too much noise coming from that camp for it to not. I remember it distinctly from Fabregas' side as well, when they were courting him back in the day. I think it happened when he was 21. I think he left when he was 24. And I just remember for those 3 years, they were just courting him, and they just waited to the right time to make an offer that wasn't over the top a lot. 35 million quid, considering the calibre of player, the potential he had, all he'd achieved with us. I thought 35 million pounds was criminal back in the day. Criminal! But nevertheless, they let him go. As far as Arsenal are concerned now, so long as they tie up the future of Ozil, that's all I really want. Sanchez, I'd love him to stay because I like him as a player, but he does cause a lot of problems, and I don't rule out the fact, because I think a lot of people overestimate the fact that yes, he's got a winning mentality, but I don't ever see a time where that's translated into something positive for the club. I don't ever see I don't see him ever rallying his teammates. I don't see him ever being boisterous with them. I only ever see him chastising them, and that's, you can be a leader, but I'm a firm believer that you've got to give both. If you're going to chastise people, you've got to give them a carrot as well. You've got to give them a reason to move forward. Apart from, if you don't, I'm going to kick you. It's just not good. So I would be staggered if two things happen. If number one, they do let him go for free next season, just get rid of him now, sell him, get the money, and bring in somebody else. You're looking at Lamar, you're looking at Mahrez. I'm not sure they're like-for-like replacements or even anywhere near as good, but it's better to have 40-50 million quid in your pocket and do something with it afterwards than to let him walk on a free. It just doesn't, it sends the wrong messages, and I think you need to take control of the situation. I'm so happy the Mbappe saga seems to be dying down. He said sarcastically, following, and this is a direct quote from Sky Sports' transfer page, following PSG's reported €160 million bid for the Frenchman, Monaco is said to have increased the asking price to €180 million. Who the fuck is getting that figure? Who the fuck thinks that an 18-year-old who's had one good season is worth €180 million? Just to clarify, that translates to roughly between 120 or 140 million pounds. You really mean to tell me you'd spend that kind of money on one player that's unproven from a French league, from a club that's had one good season, that's about to be pillaged for its players, than spending that money more on a selection of players that are going to do you a better job? Are you really serious? I really hope not, because football's going mental otherwise. Anyway, that's all I really have to say about football transfers, other than Arsenal are actually making moves, which is nice. Let's see what else they do. The transfer market's kind of hinging on this Lukaku move now, because once that move goes down, Rooney moves, Lukaku moves, Chelsea then got to make moves. A lot of money is going to start exchanging hands very, very quickly, even though, relatively speaking, it's still early days in the transfer window. Anyway, moving on to the next topic. You'll be happy to hear MMA. I've not covered MMA all that much the last couple of opportunities I've had, and that's my bad. I'm sorry, I just haven't had the opportunity to sit up and watch them live or catch up with them afterwards. However, even though when I said MMA originally I was really referring to UFC, I've recently started watching Belator. Don't know if you've ever heard of it. Basically a rival company that more or less caters to an older demographic of fighter. So say for instance the UFC, the fighters there are between, I don't know, let's say they're between 20, I don't want to say 25, that seems a bit, so 26 to maybe 32, 33. Once you get into the 34, 35, that's when you start to think about moving to Bellator, because that's when most of the heavy hitters are moving because of their age. Their recent pay-per-view, which I think was held in Madison Square Garden in New York, was brilliant. It was an excellent exhibition of fighting. It was magnificent. I mean, I watched it primarily for Chael Sonnen, who I think is probably one of the best talkers of all time, period. Not just in MMA, WWE, boxing, football, entertainment, period. He is an absolutely amazing... He's an excellent twister of a narrative. I'm not going to say he's a good guy, because I think he's too business oriented to be a good guy. He'll always do what's best for his brand and for his business to ever be a morally outstanding individual. However, you can't say the guy isn't entertaining as hell, doesn't know his stuff back to front in order to be able to defend his arguments point for point, word for word. His fight was really good. Took a couple of really clean shots to the chin, managed to stand his ground, scored at least 3 or 4 takedowns, and they were all really expertly done. And I think the other fights that were on the card as well, oh good lord, I believe his name is Vitor, big old Russian dude, competed in, I think it is in the Russian leagues. I don't think it's called Pride, I think it's called something else. But a fearsome Russian dude went up against another guy, double knockdown. It's the first time I've ever seen one that wasn't from a highlights reel. But yeah, both caught each other on the chin, went down simultaneously. Although both of them had been knocked out and regained consciousness before they hit the... It was the most amazing thing. If you can, go on to YouTube and Google the Belator highlights, because you'll see it, undoubtedly. And they both catch each other, and you can see eyes roll, halfway down, and then just as they're about to hit the floor, both of them come around, and the other guy that isn't Vitor turns and looks at him and is ready to get back up immediately to start continuing the onslaught. Vitor's not quite there yet. Then you had another fight. Again, I really should have researched this better. I'm terrible at these podcasts in terms of research. That's why I'm an exposition guy. I'm the kind of guy that can talk for a while on a point or an idea. As far as information is concerned, referencing times, dates, individuals, names, all the rest of this jazz, absolutely terrible. Couldn't do it. Would be an absolutely horrific historian. The only fact that I know that's burnt into my brain is my daughter's date of birth, how much she weighed, and what time she was born. That's it. That's the only information that I'll be able to recite from memory for the rest of my life. But anyway, point being, there was another fight, and quite early on it was evident that one of the fighters' ankles had given out, and it was really hard to watch the kicks being laid in afterwards, because every time he tried to defend the kick, put some weight back on the ankle, and just immediately it would just go. I was really worried it was broken. And I hate seeing videos of that sort of thing when you go, oh wow, that's a broken... No, and you see them move and it flops, like the Eduardo and Aaron Ramsey injuries in Arsenal's history. So Eduardo suffered a very famous and horrific leg break injury from Stoke, and I believe Aaron Ramsey he didn't suffer quite as bad. It was as bad an injury, but it wasn't quite as horrific in terms of its graphic presentation. But again, it was against Stoke from 2 late tackles that sort of caught them just above the ankle but below the middle part of the shin, where the leg is at its weakest, and just snaps the tibia right in 2, and it's really hard to watch, and I don't like watching them to this day. I'm not a person that can really do blood and gore and stuff. If I nick myself, or if I take a chunk out of myself, which happens occasionally, I'm a very clumsy individual, I can handle it. But seeing other people like getting, I can see a person get punched in the face. But there was an interesting to me it was. Been catching up on some wrestling shoot interviews recently. Shoot interviews, for those that don't know, are when wrestlers break what used to be called kayfabe, which is the artificial implementation of a reality on the world that doesn't exist. So a wrestler will maintain a kayfabe hatred of another guy, meanwhile they're actually best mates. It's the idea that they present the wrestling format in as real a way as possible to maintain the illusion so that people have a greater opportunity of being invested in the product, which doesn't really exist anymore, which is why I think wrestling is not as great as it used to be in my eyes as a fan. It's trying to maintain credibility in the eyes of the wider public, but that's where they make a mistake. We're going off topic, so back to the point, which is injuries. I don't like seeing broken legs, anything like that. And Kevin Nash was talking about one of a previous wrestler from a bygone era was talking about an altercation he'd had with his son, and how he taught his son a while back, because he was a bouncer originally, so he knew all sorts of dirty tricks of fighting, because he knew inevitably you're going to come up against someone who's tougher than you. So how do you win a fight against someone who's tougher than you? You do things that they're not prepared to do. And he taught him that one time that if you fish, even describing it makes me cringe. If you fish hook someone's eye, so you get your finger inside their eye socket and pop out their eye, they will, like anyone would, clutch their eye to try and put it back in. And then what you're saying was you can basically do what you want with them at that point, which is a fair piece of advice. Quick story. When I was a kid, there was, I won't go into names because, again, I'll be close enough for rock and roll, but when I was a kid, I had one of my father's friends was into martial arts of some degree. I don't know what discipline he studied. Nevertheless, my dad had told me that he trained at Steven Seagal's dojo or gym or whatever. I don't know how true that is, but nevertheless, I, being a cocky little shit, I couldn't have been older than 10 or 12 at the time. I remember kind of asking him, so what, you train in martial arts? Yeah. So what, could you kill somebody then? He was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could kill someone. Okay, well then answer me this. How could you kill someone with your pinky finger? And without even batting an eyelid, he'd go, I'd jam it in their eye socket. 10 or 12 kid he's saying this to. Now actually, this guy, I had a beer with him a couple of years ago, because again, I grew up around these people, and you know, they kept the same company for years and years and years. My dad's leaving do, I actually catch up to this guy and I buy him a beer and I say, dude, that story always stuck with me. Another quick story, I think I've told the story in a podcast before. When I was a kid, massive Power Rangers fan, and this guy, I shit you not, looked the splitting image of Jason from Power Rangers, the Red Ranger. And I remember sitting on the stairs as a 4 or 5 year old. Okay, this memory is very rudimental. I just remember the feeling more than anything else of holding my Power Rangers annual, looking at the picture of Jason and looking at him, and kind of through the, so my staircase was, so I sat on my staircase looking down towards the front door. There's a slight hallway, and then there's a door frame with no door in it that leads into the living room, and then there's a settee that's leant against the wall that's on the wall where the door frame is, and then through the door frame there's another single seat, which is where this guy's sitting. So that's how I could sort of peek through the cracks in the staircase barrier at him, and then look back at the fucking saddest moment of my life, and just looking at him and going, I bet that's him. I bet that's him. I wonder if I should ask if that's him. And I must have been sat there for 25 minutes, nervous as hell, wondering if I should ask. And I finally plucked up the courage, and I walked up to him, and I handed him the magazine, and I said, is that you? And without even batting an eyelid again, he said, no, and handed the magazine back to me and carried on his conversation. Now, looking back, that's fucking hilarious. I love that moment now. At the time though, as a kid, it fucking destroyed me. I couldn't have been more embarrassed and disappointed, because if it was me now and some kid walked up to me with a magazine thinking I was one of his heroes, I wouldn't say yes, because that's harsh, but I wouldn't say no, because that's harsh too. You'd go, maybe. You keep the dream alive. You don't crush the kids' dreams. Anyway, point being, I've never forgotten those two stories, and it always reminded me of the fact that I cringe when it comes to injuries, which is why I think it's interesting that I chose boxing as my main outlet for any physical altercations in terms of what I like to watch, and wrestling of course as well, because again it's relatively tame when compared to MMA, because in MMA I've seen some, we've all seen the highlights now, broken bones, snaps, broken necks, when people just drop, and they're not pleasant sights. I don't enjoy watching that. I do enjoy the spirit of competition, and there's not a part of me that doesn't go, if someone gets knocked out, it's not an oh moment, because it is, but you always have the sense that even if someone gets knocked out, they can probably pick themselves back up. As long as they didn't hit the canvas too hard, they'll probably be okay, as long as they get the right checks and they don't let getting knocked out happen too often. So it wasn't easy watching Belator, but then again, it was a tremendously entertaining pay-per-view, and I would recommend, like I said, the highlights for Belator are all on there, and I think the main parts of the show are all via the highlights, so you can probably check all that out for nothing, and then check out, because I'm certainly going to be checking out the next Belator pay-per-view. I think it's brilliant. I think it's entertaining as balls. But anyway, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about on this podcast. I'll wrap up this one by just going through a few announcements instead of doing them at the beginning of the show, because I'm conscious of the fact that not everyone has the time to sit through the whole of the podcast, so I appreciate that fact. Nevertheless, a few shout outs. GFY Productions, my boy, he's producing content again, so I really hope you guys go and check out his channel. He's much more personable than me, so I appreciate the fact that people might check out his channel expecting something that I do. I do stuff that's very different from a lot of other people I recommend, because I just think watching the same thing from a different perspective is boring. You might as well watch something completely different. You're going to spend time watching stuff on YouTube. So GFY Productions, go check him out. Michael Richard, a guy who's been partaking in a lot of my videos recently. I really appreciate the fact that he's taken the time to watch. So dude, cheers for watching, cheers for commenting. Thanks a bunch, I really appreciate it. Defunct Games, a guy called Silver. Dude, if you're listening to this, I doubt it, because you must have better things to do than listen to me ramble for 45 minutes. This is a guy with, if not hundreds, thousands of subscribers, and yet he finds the time to watch my channel. If I had thousands of subscribers, I don't think, honestly, I'd have the time to watch anyone else, because I'd be too concerned with making my content as best as it could be. This guy, I tell you what, if nothing else from this podcast, please, if you listen to this, go and watch Defunct Games, DEFUNCT Games. His channel is excellent, professional quality. The guy is a great host, an absolutely magnificent character, and he's a really, really conscientious and appreciative YouTuber. He's encouraged me ever since I've reached out to him via one of his channel videos, commented on one and asked him to check out and give me some feedback, and he did. Really, really nice guy. So please, if you don't check out anyone else on this channel, please go and check out Defunct Games, an absolute legend. Crow, my boy, Crow. He's producing some great content recently as well. Cronenborg73, making gaming fun. Go check him out as well. Raise Evil, this dude keeps commenting on my videos as well. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the likes and the subscribes. And that's pretty much it for the moment as far as the shout-outs are concerned. As far as content is concerned, I am sticking to my goal of trying to release one podcast and one video a week. I've managed that this week, albeit towards the back end of the week, so I apologise for that. Next week it should resume at normal rate of one video on a Wednesday, one video on a Friday, every single week from now on. This podcast has gone on a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but nevertheless, it is what it is. So I appreciate you watching. One last final, not a shout out, because that's such a derogatory term if you think about it, but again, I hope that everyone here, their hearts and prayers go out to Bradley. They can find the time to maybe shoot a comment or a donation to a charity that can help support. I believe it's called neuroplasty. The disease he was suffering from. It's a type of cancer that's indicative of younger people. So, most people living with it are 5 or younger. So please go and support that charity as much as you can. I appreciate you watching and listening as always. Sorry to bring the tone down initially, but I really wanted to talk about it, and it's not very often that I get a subject that I'm I really want to talk about. So I appreciate you listening. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Thanks very much for listening again. This has been the Halcyon Podcast. I've been your host, Lorne Risley. Take care. See you soon, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of the Halcyon Podcast.